The steady robbery of land in the remnants of Palestine continues against all law and humanity. A majority of Israeli Jews and many racists in the West are determined to see Mandate Palestine cleared of all Untermenschen. Who knows what Untermenschen means? A few hands go up. It means the underpeople. It's what the Hitler regime called the Jews and the Romanis and others, and they are regarded as the in fact, they're the Untermenschen. They're regarded, I'll tell you later. An early Zionist aim to gain all the territory from the Nile to the Euphrates is still in many minds. I'm closely involved with the Palestinian people. I should have returned to teach doctors and medical students last year, having set up a little medical foundation with some other doctors there for the charity that I founded, the Dove and the Dolphin. But the Zionist entity and the complicit and Zionist-dominated Foreign and Commonwealth Office, led by Mr. Miliband, stopped that. Many will recall an earlier attempt by boat just after the promised Holocaust. The boat was rammed with the clear intention of drowning all 16 of us on board.
Well, I'm David Halpin. I'm a consultant, orthopedic and trauma surgeon, aged just 70 last April. And I've worked locally at Torbay Hospital where I dealt with trauma, and I've also dealt with orthopedic surgery, that's elective work, at the Princess Elizabeth Orthopedic Hospital in Exeter, which is now a housing estate. The orthopedic unit has been added to the General Hospital. And I retired full-time work in '93, and I did part-time work for about, I think 7 or 8 years, a variety of tasks. And I've been living here at Haytor for the last 10 years, having chosen to come somewhere quieter where I could think. I felt that need. The village we were in before was getting a bit crowded and noisy. Lots of cars, litter. And when they started bombing Afghanistan from 32,000 feet, that is carpet bombing. You cannot bomb accurately from 32,000 feet. Well, you can, with special instruments, no doubt. The poorest people on earth in Afghanistan, or some of the poorest people, in response to a false flag operation, that is the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers, not on Tower 7. When I saw it happening in October 2001, I was outraged. And I thought, what's this world? What are we doing? I decided to spend all my efforts, or almost all my efforts, attempting to, with others, to see justice in Palestine, because I know that Palestine is the hinge of our humanity. This terrible injustice, this grotesque suffering that these people have undergone since 1948 and before 48, in effect, no one has attempted to deal with it. And I know that so much, as you know, the tremendous religious potential there, the sight of concern for three major religions. And I felt that I must work there, and that's what I've done. So the last 8 years, I spent all my time, and the most significant thing I did to start with was I could tell you more about this, but I decided that I heard of doctors being stopped from taking drugs to the Palestinian people at the Israeli borders. And that also outraged me. And I decided that the only way to deal with it was to take a boat so big that they couldn't stop it, and it would have attached to it such publicity that they would be, should we say, wrong-footed. So on the 1st of February 2003, I chartered a Danish cargo vessel with 4 of the Britons and the 6 Danish crew who were marvellous people. We took 50 tons of symbolic aid in this 600-ton cargo vessel to Ashdod in Israel, and it was taken south by lorries. The video of that voyage is on my website, David Halpin, and it was a symbol of our common humanity with sisters and brothers who were under the boot, not just of Israel, but of the Western nations, especially this nation and the United States. The central injustice is that in the drive to form an exclusively Jewish state in what they call the Promised Land, for what they regard as the chosen people, 800,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes, their land, and their living by force of arms and by sheer terror. Terror produced by massacres, especially the massacre of Deir Yassin, which the anniversary of which we've just passed. And this was 2/3 of the Arab Palestinian population of Palestine, as we called it, more lately Mandate Palestine. And those people were driven in all directions, the majority in fact to Gaza, where I concentrated my efforts. The United Nations, just to underline the way injustice is ingrained in the world that's controlled by the West, in November 1948, that's about 6 months after the what was to become Israel declared their independence, in inverted commas, there was a resolution, United Nations General Assembly Resolution 194, which demanded that anyone who wished to live in peace, Palestinians, should be allowed to return to their lands and their homes. In fact, about 380 or more villages and towns have been erased, and some of them are just pine plantations now, over mounds of rubble. That's the fact of it. And hardly any Palestinian has returned. They made sure of that. It gets worse, you see, because there is an obsession with cleansing the land of all Palestinians, the native people. It is ethnic cleansing, but it can't be tolerated in, say, Darfur, or at least it's talked about there, or in Kosovo, but it is tolerated there since 1948. It started before, actually. And that's injustice. Just imagine the landholders here in Devon, small farmers and rather bigger farmers, some bigger farmers. Just imagine they were driven from their often lovely farmhouses to, say, the Welsh valleys, to stay there for the next 62 years. That's injustice. And upon that injustice has been added hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other injustices. I could tell you so much about it. It is heartrending what happens. Probably this morning, 3 o'clock, in the dark, some jeeps would have swept into an Arab village in the so-called West Bank, ineptly named because the West Bank's been taken by the Israelis. They would have yanked out perhaps a 14-year-old boy, perhaps and a brother, allegedly for throwing stones at a concrete wall which is illegal, 32 feet high, taken to the back of a jeep, handcuffed, perhaps hooded, and then taken to an interrogation centre, the parents not knowing initially where they are. Some of those children are tortured. This is in 2010, in the year of our Lord 2010. It is unbelievable. And it exists because the Western leaders, particularly in this country, and in the States, and in Israel, are led mostly by psychopaths. They're people who have no human feeling, or very little of it, and also have no respect for law, for international law. It's all well written. Nuremberg principles are well written, but the Israelis, who were one of the, who their relatives, of whom suffered under the Third Reich, they neglect this completely. In fact, when I mention the Nuremberg principles in front of Jewish Zionists, they get very, very agitated indeed. They don't want to know about it. Denial is part of it. And I cannot, that's why I work, I spend a lot of time. It's exhausting. It exhausts my wife partly because my mind is mostly on these things, not entirely. It's also on injustices like Dr. Kelly, the fact that he's never had a proper inquest. Things like that. I'm driven by the I hate injustice, I hate lawlessness, and I love people who enrich life, who are life enhancing, and I detest people who are life denying. And most of our leadership our leaderships in the States, in this country, and Israel, are life denying. You've heard me say this before, haven't you, I think? The symbol most people have, the paradigm in their minds, most decent people, and often more humble people, is of the mother with a baby on her breast. Now this is as foreign to the likes of psychopaths such as Blair. It is foreign to them. They have no idea of it. He's had 4 children, but you wouldn't think so, because he's quite happy to put to death over 1 million humans in Iraq, and to maim perhaps over 2 million. I'm told that in Iraq there are children limping around in most villages, maimed from Mr. Blair and Mr. Bush, and with the support of their Israeli friends, who are equally psychopathic. Now the dignity. You know that, people do not know this, but in February 2008, the Deputy Defense Minister of the so-called Israeli Defense Force, more appropriately called the Israeli Occupation Force, announced that he promised the people of Gaza a greater Shoah. Shoah is Hebrew for Holocaust. Now you must remember, you must think of him using that word in the Israeli and Jewish context to speak about the Holocaust for someone else. That was February 2008. There were these Qatar rockets, handmade rockets, being fired by several groups in Gaza, young men, futile weapons largely. They'd killed only about 12 or 13 Israelis since 2002, whereas they've lost hundreds and hundreds of Palestinians. They were being fired, and that was why Vilna was making that threat. In June, a truce was signed between the Israelis and Hamas, and that was mediated by the Egyptians. That was in June, and within the rockets stopped pretty well completely, although there were some renegade units still firing them, and Hamas tried to rein in. In that same June, the Israelis started planning to bombard and invade Gaza. This is entirely typical behavior. At the time when they agree a hudna, a truce, it's not exactly a truce hudna, it's a stay, a stop. They at the same time start planning another military action. And that started, well, in fact what happened on the 4th of November 2008, they invaded Gaza, and they abducted some Palestinians and killed, I can't remember now, I think about 6. And still the hudna held on the Palestinian side, but about 2 weeks later there was a further so-called incursion, another euphemism the BBC use, and then the rockets started flying again. I emphasise they are handmade, and they're not guided, and mostly they cause some anxiety, maybe even terror, just as it causes terror to missiles on the Gaza side. And then things started heating up, and on the 27th of December they started bombarding Gaza, as you know. It was wholesale. It was because of 1.5 million people there, and it's very densely populated, one of the most densely populated parts of the world. There was civilian injury from word go, and in fact I can emphasise this. This is very important to know. The attack started at 11 o'clock on the 27th of December, mostly helicopters, F-16s, I think. And within a quarter of an hour of that starting, they'd killed over 200 people. Mostly they were police graduates and children. The children were changing shifts. The schools are so crowded, they changed shifts at 11 o'clock. They knew that, the Israelis. They also, this is not known widely, but they were also targeting civil defence centres from which the ambulances are coordinated. And it was hardly one civil defence centre left intact within a quarter of an hour of the bombardment starting. It was deliberate. It was targeted so that there was dislocation of the means to deal with the casualties, and many of the ambulances were fired upon. This has been written up by Eva Jacobitz, who's in fact in prison now in Israel. She was on the boats. Iwa, wonderful girl. And something like 11 doctors and paramedics were killed. Now you know very well that even in the First World War, a hellhole, that a Red Cross meant that you didn't fire upon it. But that doesn't count when it's the Israelis attacking populations in Lebanon or Gaza or wherever. Now, so that started, and I wept, I think. I probably was also outraged. I suppose I wasn't surprised either. And I decided, I knew a boat was leaving from Larnaca because I belonged to, I'm loosely attached to an organisation called Free Gaza, which played a big part in the present flotilla. And I found that there was a place on the boat, and they were willing for me to take it. And I flew immediately. It was the Christmas celebrations, which I find difficult anyway, but I went up to Heathrow by train and then by plane, and joined the ship about an hour before it cast off, slipped its moorings at Larnaca. And that was 8 o'clock on the 27th, and we gunned out into the Mediterranean in the dark, in a calm, and within a short time there was a pretty stiff wind and it got rough. And at about 5 o'clock, I've been vomiting all night, I get seasick quite easily now, and at 5 o'clock in the morning there were 15 other passengers, some very remarkable people amongst them. There were 2 doctors, one a surgeon, lady surgeon from Cyprus, remarkable lady with some supporters, and a young Palestinian doctor who I knew already, and there were some camera teams, one Al Jazeera, one from CNN. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, some searchlights appeared astern, and I knew that they were gunboats because I'm familiar with them from being in Gaza and seeing them creaming along in a few miles off the coast, and at some time shooting the fishermen in their great cruelty. And the searchlights continued. They came abreast, they went ahead, fell back. These vessels can do 45 knots or more. The wake sometimes, they call it the rooster's tail, I think they call it. The wake is sometimes 3 times as high as a boat, massively powerful. And it seems to go quite over half an hour, 5:30. And then, a few minutes later, there's a tremendous crash on the bow, and the bow dipped a few feet, it seemed. Another crash across the saloon where I was sitting with the cartons and medical supplies on the port beam. And the master said, we've been rammed. I could feel that. But I thought we were breaking up. Would soon be in the sea as the boat foundered, and that I would drown. There was about a 10-foot sea. It was dark, and there was about a 4 to 5 force, Beaufort force wind. And we scrabbled for our life jackets, life vests. Dear Cynthia McKinney, a remarkable lady from ex-congresswoman, who spoke her mind about Zion, what it was doing in America and in Palestine, and was therefore ousted from the Congress, using some trick, I forget which. She said to me, David, I can't swim. I said, Cynthia, I will stay with you. She always thinks I saved her life. I did nothing of the sort. I just, in fact, gave her some comfort. In fact, I knew we would drown if we went down, if the boat went down, because I was wearing a puffer jacket, which would be useless in the sea, and I knew too that they would run us down if we were still buoyant. And also the wake would have been used to help drown us as well, actually. And it would have been a short story. I hadn't thought this as I knew later. It would have been a short story that activists, I hate the word, activists had lost at sea position 63 miles off the Israeli coast of Haifa. We were 63 miles off, by the way. And a boat built in 1972 in Italy. That was it. Do you see? Great sorrow. Anyway, we didn't sink. The pumps were working. There was a leak below the waterline. The wheelhouse was smashed terribly, and the mast was lucky not to have been injured or killed, because the bow rode right up over the bow of our boat, the Dignity. And it wasn't a glass reinforced plastic boat hull, which I think is what the Israelis thought. It was in fact marine ply with oak ribs and a strong boat, and that's why it didn't sink. We had two 840 Detroit diesel motors down below. It was a fast boat, and with that weight down below, and if the pumps had not been adequate, and if the hole in the hull had been large, we would have been down like a stone. You see? So I did actually think for a little while that I was going to leave this world, along with my 15 mates. The only other Briton was the master, Dennis, good chap, good master. Anyway, he put out a mayday, and there was no response. The sea was empty of craft apart from us, the Dignity, and these two bloody Israeli gunboats with their cannons on their foredecks and all the rest of their bloody weapons, and their very powerful motors down below. And that's all we had. And the first warning. The other thing is, I should add this, not a thing I've written about before, but you usually use channel 16 for communication at sea, I believe, from memory. But the Israelis insist upon using another channel. Guess why? So that their conversations with ships are more easily excluded from other vessels. But over I think on channel 16 came this from one of the masters of the Israeli gunboats. He said, "You are subversives or terrorists," or something like that, "and we're going to shoot you." I'm told this to Dennis. I believe Dennis, he's a very straight chap. He then in fact said, "You have to make back to Larnaca." We were already 3/4 of our way to Gaza. We didn't have sufficient diesel, but more especially the wheelhouse was smashed. If we'd have had big head seas, as we would have had actually if we turned, that's what it was, in fact it was a northerly wind, we would have in fact been shipping water and more likely sinking. So this was, they attacked us with lethal intent. They wanted to try. I have no doubt about that at all. It's been put out by the Israelis then, it was put out as a collision. A collision. We were trying to avoid. We took avoiding action, collided with them by mistake. This is the spin. This is the lie, like the lies they're putting out now about the boarding of the ship and the mass murder on the decks of the Mavi Mamre. Anyway, the master, I'm not sure we negotiated with him, but he said no, he didn't have enough diesel, but we could go to, and we weren't allowed to go to Gaza. Let's stop that. We could have got to Gaza quite easily, and running. In fact, the sea was running with us, and we put about and went to Sur, where we received the hero's welcome. After we passed the Israeli limits, we were taken over by a very large UNIFIL boat. United Nations is very good at all these titles, UNIFIL, UNRWA, UNICEF. They're very good at this, at the persisting misery of humanity. And this is one of them relating to the Lebanon War. This big ship took us under its wing. We went up in towards Tyre, Sur as it's called there, and then a Lebanese army torpedo boat type of thing took us in to dock. But what more can I say about the dignity? As I say, the attempt, I have no doubt that their attempt, that their ramming was lethal. And there's a feature which it's worth repeating, that I got from the master later. Apparently, one gunboat stayed on our port side and played its searchlight on our port hull. The other gunboat, which had no lights on it, no searchlights when it came at us, came at about, I think, 40 degrees to our bow to strike us, and its bow rode up over, and in fact, as I say, into the wheelhouse. But there's something about that the way one gunboat plays its searchlight onto the hull of a civilian ship at 5:30 in the morning, in the dark and in a stiff sea, while the other rapacious, lethal master drives his boat at our bow. That, I think, captures the mentality of the people and the military there, and perhaps our military here, I don't know. Although I don't think any naval man here would ram a civilian boat who knew it was no risk to it. Well, the thing is, it's in detail, but it shows the mentality, and it shows the psychopath in it, actually, and that's a theme that I keep returning to. That's what's happening now, a psychopath. I wasn't surprised when their threats were carried out, that is, that they would stop the ships and board them and put them under tow to Ashdod or Haifa. And I suppose it was part of my reason, in fact it was part of my reason, for not joining the boats this time. Because Sue had a rough time, my wife. She's a gentle person, she hates violence, actually, like a lot of women do. And I thought about it and decided not to go. Another reason was that if I in fact was, like these people have been, imprisoned after being taken off the boats, I might not have with me a few pills that I need. I need a beta blocker to stop me getting atrial fibrillation, which can lead to a clotting in your heart and a stroke, to be quite blunt about it. And so that was the thought, and I perhaps would have been anxious, not too anxious, but I would not have liked being separated from a particular thing. So I didn't go. And another thing, you talked about the charity. We talked about the charity. I was very keen to send about £10,000 worth of milk powder from Ireland, where the boat was loading. It was in fact crewed by Irish people, and I contacted Dairies. It wasn't easy, and in fact eventually I was pleased it didn't happen, because I thought the chances of getting this milk powder to children in Gaza, and they're short of it, the high quality protein is lacking there. There is widespread malnutrition. About a third of the mums and a third of the youngsters are undeficient. Did you know that? Undeficient. In 2010. No meat's allowed in, I understand, through the Israeli border, Kfar Sharon. And so, anyway, that's just the background. So I didn't go on the thing, but of course I was following it and wishing them well. And I can't remember, I went to bed when the threats were being issued and woke up at 6 to find that they'd in fact boarded the big Turkish cruise vessel. And although they've lied right, left and centre, they've selected carefully what videos they've shown for general consumption worldwide on the mainstream media, and I'm sure some of that is probably doctored as well. Anyway, it's certainly selected. But they've turned it around to say they were attacked. You know, well, we know that the ship, this big ship, was shot at by the, and there were 11 naval vessels, or 11 or 13, 11 I think, surrounding this flotilla. And they were shooting at the Marmara before any boarding took place via helicopter and rope. And there's quite a few things about that, which we might discuss later. But I think that there was some targeting of some of the individuals on the boat. That leads me back to the Dignity, where we had a little impromptu press conference on the dock before our ship cast off. And there were 3 journalists there, so-called, and I'm sure one was a spy. They were taking photographs of us. They had the final crew list. And they would have known what we had been saying and doing for our Palestinian sisters and brothers. It's exactly the same on the Marmara. So there is a feeling there that was, I'm pretty certain, that the killing was planned. We hear that 9 people died, or at least 9, we don't know what it is, and quite extraordinary. If there was a plane crash, you'd have a passenger list, you'd be told pretty immediately how many corpses there were and how many people had survived. In this case, we don't know that. So the people, there's about 41 English people, British people on the boat, and those mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters have been going through a very anxious time, wondering whether their loved one is one of the corpses or not. Now, whether that's deliberate, I don't know. I think it may be partly poor organisation. What they've been trying to do is to hold back the worst information and eyewitness reports until the crest of outrage has dissipated, has ebbed away in the populations. It's not ebbing away, I don't think. That's what they're hoping. But that's one reason why they're in prison. So they've taken away their mobiles, their cameras, their tapes, and I bet you'll make jolly sure that most of those actually are erased before they come back to them. So the thing was, I have to say, it was deliberate. It is based on psychopathic personalities in their leadership and in some of their military, probably in all a good deal of their military, and that its purpose, I don't know what the purpose is. People say that it was partly to do with Turkey offering to deal with Iran's nuclear enrichment. I can't remember the exact arrangements, but I know it's been brushed aside by the Americans and the Israelis. And I can't think it's as simple as that. I think it's about this. When I go across the Israeli borders, now I haven't been allowed to for the last 18 months. I tried twice, applied to them and told that I cannot. But when you go across, you know that they hate you helping Palestinians. They hate it. They regard them as I said, I think in a talk recently, not as the Untermenschen, the under people, but as the Untermenschen. Hardly hardened snakes. I really mean it, actually. It is extraordinary. You feel a hatred in them. They say, why are you doing this? I was told once, why was I helping Palestinian children? I was coming out of so-called Ben Gurion Airport, what we call Lud Airport, which was the name of the Palestinian town which was raised there. And you know this in them, actually. So that was a very strong thing. They talk about weapons going into Gaza, rockets from Syria and Iran, demonize those countries, to vilify them. But the strong motive is they do not want you to come to the aid of the Palestinian people. They hate it. It's partly for that reason that no Israelis are allowed into the Palestinian areas. Some succeed in doing that, like Almira Hass, the journalist, but it's also partly because, of course, the risk of kidnap, perhaps. But it's a lot to do with this feeling that these people should be shunned, isolated, life made so difficult that they leave Palestine. All the time they're creating mechanisms where families are thinned down and people emigrate. One of of our trustees is a Palestinian, Anglo-Palestinian, mum's English. 4 siblings, 3 of them in this country. And that's what they want, do you see? So this is part of this process of cleansing Israel, in inverted commas, the Zionist entity as I call it, cleansing the Zionist entity of all Palestinian Arabs, be they Christian, and you got 1% now, used to be 20%, in 1948, it's now 1%. But whoever they are, the fact that they are Arab, and especially if they're Muslim, they have to be out. And they're using every mechanism in the book to do that. They're not achieving it, mind you, but by Jove, they're trying hard, with every cruel trick in the book. Well, you're right to raise it, and you're right to call it a stranglehold. It is said that in the last Parliament, 80% of the Conservative MPs belong to Conservative Friends of Israel. The present Foreign Secretary, who's been uttering smooth but weasel words about the assault on the people on the Marmara, joined the Conservative Friends of Israel at the age of 15. Did you know that? He made this speech which was widely broadcast, sort of very adolescent, seemingly rather naive and very unusual. You might say nerd. Age 15, in the same year he joined the Conservative Friends of Israel. Now what drives a youth of 15 to join the Friends of Israel? We've tried to tackle this. Stuart Littlewood and about 15 others of us wrote to the committee, it's a laughable title really, Committee for the Standards in Public Life. The man's now called Kelly, is Sir Kelly, ex-Mandarin, who's the chairman. And we wrote, I think 3 years ago now, to try and to take action on this. We were brushed off in the way that they're rather good at, belittling you, misspellings, things like that. But we raised this matter. We studied it, and we found that there was hardly a senior minister in the New Labour government, inverted commas government, who were not Friends of Israel. And we thought it likely that you could not get a good ministerial post without being a friend. Liberal Democrats are the same. In fact, they were the first to start such an organisation. And if you look at their website, it's a rather amateurish affair, but it actually is treason. What they're considering the welfare of another country as being equivalent to our own. Now you know that a member of Parliament has to consider the welfare of his own country first and foremost. But these people are not doing that, and they are all committing treason. And you remember that treason in olden times was rewarded by being clapped up in the Tower of London and sometimes losing your head. But we've lost our principles and we've lost our sense of direction. And the idea is now that you have to talk about the security of the state of Israel, and it is more important for the person uttering that, the security of David Halpin, who served his country in the health service, loyally and arduously and truthfully, but they're more concerned about dealing with an invention really, a cuckoo in the Middle Eastern nest, which has caused the most terrible suffering in Palestine and in the states around, as designed. Empires thrive on chaos, as you know, and Israel is a wonderful way of causing chaos in the Middle East, as it has done. Now, what do we do about that? Well, we speak about it. I think it's becoming more obvious. Peter Oborn produced that Channel 4 program, did you see it? On this subject. Rather surprising, because we'd written to him before it as it happened. Perhaps we helped to trigger it. But he produced a pretty good program. It was blunted a bit, but it showed how venal the connections were, how the funding of political parties came quite often from Zionist supporters, like, say, Lord Sainsbury. So I can remember this, I could quote quite a few actually. I remember Lord Levi, who went around as the bag carrier for Blair and was largely responsible with Mandelson for the election of Blair's government, the Blair government. And that was a lot to do with money, because money buys you advertising so that people with empty brains take it in. And that's how it works. And that's why Obama, who has all the skills of the neurolinguistic skills of Hitler, that's why he, who was chosen early, in fact, by the Zionists to be a future leader, that's why he had $760 million for his election campaign. Now, some of that was small donations, a lot of it was large donations as well. So this is another ill of our system, apart from party politics, which is an ill in itself, I believe. People should be standing up as individuals, men and women, of skill and principle, of known principle. But that's how it works. $760 million to elect Obama on a peace ticket. And he's put 100,000 troops, isn't he, or something like that, into Afghanistan. And there's the same number of troops in Iraq still. And his policies are as bloody as the previous incumbent. So what I'd like to say, I'm trying to round this up, this summary. Friends of Israel here in our parliament, very powerful indeed. Why talk about the security and something of Israel? I forget it's the formula you keep hearing it, and the viability of Palestine. Why not the security of Palestine? It's the viability of Palestine, security of Israel. Good example of the mindset of these people. Now in America it's worse than that. America actually dances to the Israeli tune, even though it's about 5 million people, 5 million Israeli Jews in Israel, in the Zionist entity, and something like 16 million Jews, most of whom don't support Zionism, I'm told, in the States. But AIPAC, American Israel, I feel what the next bit stands for, JINSA, Anti-Defamation League, led by Foxman, is about 50 lobbies, Jewish lobbies in the States. Not Jewish, Jewish Zionist lobbies in the States. They set the pace. So if my sister sends me today links to Republican people speaking about the attack by the passengers on the Marmara on these peace-loving Israeli commandos who've come down from Apache helicopters. Understand me? But they're repeating it like tape recorders or megaphones. So over there will be what's it called now? Israel Today or something. There's a big propaganda organisation over there, but they'll be repeating this stuff like the telegraph system. Over here is BICOM, run by an ex-MP called Fitzsimmons, a lady. And very powerful they are too. And you can bet your bottom dollar they're on the phone to the BBC all the time, feeding it in, feeding the poison in, so our population is never properly informed about the misery and injustice of the people, the misery and injustice that the people in Palestine suffer, or in the countries around. They're fed poison about Iran and about Ahmadinejad wanting to obliterate Israel. But he's been traduced, if you look at the transcript, I've seen, I can't read Farsi, but I've seen an elegant Farsi writer analysing the words that he used, and he did not speak about obliterating Israel, the Zionist empire. He said that it would die, and so it will. All things which have an evil basis, it has an evil basis, because of its exclusivity, that these things that have an evil basis do die. No question about that. But there was an act passed a long time ago in the American Congress which should preclude all aid being given to a nuclear state which is not part of the NPT treaty. Something like that anyway. The thing is that what we can surely say, forget the statutes, what we're saying in fact is that this tiny, belligerent, lethal nation stuck at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, which always tells us about all the Arab enemies around it, which I know very well, in fact would live perfectly well with it if it could live sensibly with Palestinians in the land it took from the Palestinians, that the fact that is being armed and funded by America is grotesque. It is partisanship of the worst sort. I need to say also that $2 billion a year is going to Mubarak. We never mention him, of course. He's a dictator. He's now in his 29th year as a president of Egypt. They suppress Muslim political movements viciously. They have a most extensive Mukharabat, secret service, secret police. They torture willy-nilly. Some of our nationals have been tortured there, I'm sure, sometimes with the knowledge of MI6 or MI5. And of course he's being kept there as Arafat. Well, I'll leave Arafat alone actually. But we could speak about Abbas, who is a quisling. But Mubarak is being fed £2 billion to a pretty tricky country, big population, not too much in the way of land, to keep him on side. So he in fact has been shutting up the Rafah border. He's quite happy to persecute the Palestinians as viciously as Israelis are punishing. So that's just to provide a bit of balance. So that's how America spends its money. It's a bung. And we're running, what we're talking about is a psychopathic international mafia of the most massive proportions. It's not all to do with Jewish Zionism. It's often something partly to do with corporate power. But certainly capital is right in there in a big way. But bungs are part of it, aren't they? Aren't they? Now, what do we do? Well, when I speak, I usually say that our duty, our first duty as citizens in this, as the demos in this sham democracy, and it is a sham democracy. It is a sham democracy. For some of the reasons I've alluded to, like advertising and party pot and the party system. But our duty as citizens in this wonderful, in this beautiful world, which we harm so badly, is to inform ourselves. And to inform ourselves from the mainstream media is a foolish thing to do because it's very partisan, ill-informed. A lot of reports are incomplete. Journalists are lazy people on the whole. A lot of it's opinion, personality. We inform ourselves and we dismiss, you dismiss, all the rubbish about the manager of the British soccer team. Will he be sacked if they don't get enough goals? And rubbish like that. What a principle to consider, sacking someone because the team doesn't do so well. That's the sort of thing which people are being fed. We must inform ourselves, and when we've informed ourselves, and the internet is really the only way to do that, and by talking to each other, informing each other, meeting with conscientious groups, with people who you know are truthful and care about our world and about our fellow beings, we then in fact stand up and speak out. And I've done my best for that for the last 8 years. It's been quite hard work at times. And of course you're vilified, but also, in the process I might reassure you, you also meet the most wonderful people. People who have courage and who encourage you. And then what do we do after that, after speaking out? Well, we have to meet together. I'm not too keen on marches now. They tend to be rather noisy and a bit distracting. I think I'm going to one on Saturday about this assault on the cruise ship, the Marmara, I forget, it's a march from somewhere to somewhere else. My sister's going to be there as well, and some friends will take me. But what do we do? I don't know what we do more, but I know one thing, that people power is the only way forward. The politicians are absolutely useless in this country, and in the States, and Israel, and in fact in most of the Arab countries too, to be blunt about it. So it's the people. And John Pilger speaks of this people power. people power. And I'm going to be speaking about it tomorrow on Press TV, on the agenda programme with a Labour MP called Linton and with a Zionist called Fraser from the Zionist Federation of Ireland and Britain, I think. But I know they're going to focus on what the people's reaction is to this massacre, and whether that will emerge, whether it will help empower the people more, and whether people will make a difference. Well, I think they will. And I think Pilt is right. So all we have, I have actually often said that you don't, when you see something like I saw in Palestine 8 years ago and before, when you see that, you see it not being dealt with, addressed, to use their useless word, addressed. When you see that, you have to go around politicians or over them. But I cannot think of a politician, bar about 4, who helped in the last parliament to Palestine. Perhaps a few more. Something like that. But it shows you how bankrupt our system is and how we have to take the initiative. And we have to look at our history, look at the Chartists and the Levellers and Peterloo, which I was taught about that at school. But there were people, if you ever want to see what the Englishman, the poor Englishman is capable of, read the letters written by the Lovelaces, the Tolpuddle martyrs, who were being offered 5 pence a week, I think it was, rather than 6 pence a week, and they were already starving their families. And read the English and the vigour of it, and compare it with the pap which we see today in our newspapers. And we must try and imitate those people, because we are in big trouble, very big trouble, and we must get out of it for the sake of all those children. And that's what I'd like to end on by saying, what drives me mostly is the child. And I have 3 lovely grandchildren, and I see in their eyes, their beautiful eyes, I saw them yesterday as it happens, the eyes of 2 billion children in our world. They and their mothers are all equally precious, and not one should be harmed in the least way. So for the mother and the child, a symbol of peace, think, stand up, and act together to make our world better than these bloody politicians are doing for it.
Gaza is an internment camp. The draconian siege is beyond all law, and all the Western nations are complicit in their silence. Every imaginable crime is committed against the Palestinian people by a ruthless and pitiless occupier of the whole of Mandate Palestine. That's Palestine as you see it in the older Bibles.